I had a question. When did I get into fiber tools? It's interesting. If you remember about 17, 18 years ago, there was this wild craze with the funky eyelash yarn to make scarves. And my wife knitted, my sister knitted, my mother knitted, and you needed a size 17 knitting needle. And you couldn't find them. They just got wiped out. So I started making very high-end wooden knitting needles. They were cherry needles with cocoa bolo caps and things like that. I worked very hard to perfect my tips, and with the and so I started making knitting needles. And we had been on vacation. We were down south. We were in Maryland. We stopped at a fiber shop, and I brought them my knitting needles, and they gobbled a bunch up. And they said, "Can you make a drop spindle?" And I'm like, "Sure, I know how to make a drop spindle." I knew what they were. And they were like, "Well, have you ever been to the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival?" And I'm like, "No, I'm a city kid. I know what a sheep looks like from 1,000 feet." But they're like, "Well, it's the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival. It's in 2 weeks. It's the biggest fiber festival in the country. You need to come to it." Long story short, I came home. I made some beautiful looking non-functional drop spindles and got up Friday morning. It was a beautiful day, and a friend of mine lived one exit away from Maryland. So I turned to Kathy. I said, "I'm going to go down to this fiber festival." Well, little did I know what I was getting into. So long story short, I talked to a lot of vendors, and I met Stefana Isaacson from Handspun by Stefana. At that time, she was one of 17 people in the country that had her advanced accreditation from the Spinning and Weaving Guild of the United States. She's a world expert and teacher. Wonderful, wonderful lady. And she literally grabbed me by my shirt and said, "Oh, I'd like to get you a wood turners early. Here's how to make a proper drop spindle." And she goes, "Go make some and send them to me." So I came home, I sent her, made a dozen, sent them to her. She was like, "These are great. Make the notches a little bigger. Call Susan, call Tony, tell them I sent you." Well, I called Susan from Susan's Fiber. I called Tony Neal from the Fold. I said, "Stefana Isaacson said I should contact you. I make drop spindles." And they're both like, "Oh, great, send me a dozen." And with that, I've been making spindles ever since. I primarily wholesaled my spindles. I don't personally go to fiber festivals, but I've had people like Carolina Homespun represented me, and the Weaving Works out on the West Coast, Paradise Fibers, and lots of small vendors. I like working with small vendors or going to regional fiber shows and whatnot. So I'm more than happy to wholesale, and actually prefer that. But that's the story. It's long-winded, but I've been making spindles now for about 17 years, and I make a good spindle. With that, I'm going to wrap it up. I do appreciate everybody attending. I do appreciate your orders and your business. And I look forward to making a kick spindle or drop spindles for you. Thanks, everybody. And just as a reminder, tcspindles.com is my shop. TC Turning for general information. Quilting by mail if you know any quilters. And with that, I'm going to call it a wrap. I'm Jim Ector at True Creations Wood Turning.